Hello, and welcome to today's installment of the Unscathed Life podcast. Yes, I am taking my sweet time in introducing the guest I have today because he is amazing. Literally, when have you heard me sound this excited about a guest? I bet never. Well, actually, I lie. I sound excited about all my guests, but I am super excited about today's guest. I have got the phenomenal John Obidi in the house. Whoop, whoop. And for those of you who don't know John Obidi, he's a new media consultant. He's an international speaker. He's a personal development trainer, and he's highly skilled in many things. He's a compelling visionary. He's a phenomenally resourceful person, and he brings, practical intelligence and transferable solutions to both the workplace and marketplace as a whole. And he does that very, very in very unconventional, innovative ways, and he's just all round amazing. I'm going to say a couple bits from his bio that I think are definitely noteworthy. In 2018, John was voted amongst Avalanche Media 100 most influential young Nigerians, coming in second in the final rankings. And in December 2018, he also won the Future Awards Africa Prize for New Media. And in 2020, he was voted amongst the 100 most influential young Africans, not Nigerian, Africans. So John, he currently serves as the executive board. It serves on the executive board, I beg your pardon, as the director of growth and future tech of Abit Network, one of Africa's largest blockchain companies. John, you see how I'm tongue-tied trying to introduce you. You're doing too much. You're doing the most, as they say. That's why the words are not flowing. You're doing too much. I am super excited to have you here. Thank you for being a guest here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is awesome. And so I've read that script, but what I always want my guests to do is to introduce themselves, because you will say it better than any script will, right? So tell us, who is John? Who is the essence of John Obidi? Like, what is the essence of you? Who are you?
Well, that's not something I typically talk about. I just let other people who experience me to define me from their own lenses. I mean, like Jesus Christ would typically ask, who do men say I am? Who do you say I am? I mean, my name is John Obidi. Who am I? That is a factor that is always changing and always evolving. Whatever answer I give you today will be false in a year from now. So I keep it open to being dynamic. I do not let myself get boxed into any one identity. I think that life is too short to live all my life in one corner of the world. That can mean geographically, that can mean philosophically, that can mean career-wise too. So I'm just here to do my time within the time allotted to me on this physical realm and have fun while I'm at it. Let some people experience some of my sweetness, my value, and we'll just see where it goes.
I think, Mayan, I love that you say that, but I think a definition for you that I will give that just transcends, all of your different incarnations, if I may, it's just you're a custodian of value. That's the thing that I see. You hold value and you kind of almost freely give it out. You've got this desire, innate desire. From what I have seen so far, I don't know you that well, but just being able to observe you from my own lens, you've got this desire to help other people become better. Would you say that's true?
Yes, that is true.
You see? So I have got that. Because I see, and the reason I say this, and I would like to start here, one of the things that has intrigued me, just from my very limited interactions with you is, I know we were just talking just before we came on here, and I was talking about, I came on your night school, and I just found that so, like, night school. First of all, when I first heard night school, I'm like, what is night school? Like how? Where did that come from? What do you do there? And how have you been able to gather so many people, to and impact value week on week to them? I would love to hear you kind of teach on that a little bit, or just speak on that.
Okay, so I started life out as a social media manager. Well, I mean, this incarnation of my life. I started out as social media manager, online business consultant, new media consultant, and I used to hold online events around new media. Now, even though new media became my work, it was never really the passion. It was an accidental passion. A friend of mine just came one day and introduced it to me, and I thought, okay, I have a very strong tech background. I love tech. I studied computer science in the university, so I used to be a programmer in that previous incarnation of my life. So I thought, okay, if I could figure out new media technologies, social media technologies, online advertising, it could open doors for me and other things that I might want to do. So I just went into it, learned it, and I think 9 months after I started self-teaching, I started teaching myself social media management, was when I first got nominated for the Future Awards Africa Prize for New Media in 2013.
Oh wow!
I just started in January 2013, and I was nominated that same year, 2013. I don't think they knew that I just started that year, and I wasn't going to be the one to tell them. But that was some sort of validation, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I was not even based in Lagos State. I was based in a place called Benin City in Edo State in Nigeria. And so getting nominated for that award got me to move to Lagos. I was invited to Lagos for the nominee reception dinner, and there I met the brilliant people of Lagos, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to be here. So the very next year, 2014, I moved permanently to Lagos, and then I began to experience myself. I began to meet myself. Because what I mean by that is there are some parts of you that you will not meet until you get into a particular environment.
So true. I love that.
There's this thing in chemistry about chemical reactions.
Yeah.
Certain chemical reactions will only happen under specific conditions. Some of those conditions will only happen at a certain temperature. When we say what is photosynthesis, remember that old stuff we learned in primary school. Photosynthesis is the process whereby I don't remember the exact definition, but it talks about getting
sunlight.
No, sunlight is the last part of the definition, but it talks about the whole carbon dioxide versus oxygen. It now says in the presence of sunlight. So it means that the whole reaction will not occur without sunlight, right? Also in chemistry, just as a sidebar, what's funny is that I wish I knew just how important physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics were to understanding life. I wish I knew it in secondary school. I would have taken school more seriously. Like, the secrets of life are in mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. They are codified in those subjects. I understood this thing much later, after school, much later. And I was wowed. Anyway, there's this thing in chemistry that we call a catalyst.
That's what I was actually about to say.
Yes.
Catalyst. Yeah.
So say a catalyst is something that speeds up the rate of a chemical reaction. We also have the opposite of a catalyst called an inhibitor. It reduces the rate of a chemical reaction. So in life, what does that mean? It means that in life, there are certain things that will naturally happen for you, maybe by the time you are 70. But there are certain factors, certain environments that can speed up the rate of that chemical reaction. And you need to find those things. So if anybody is so biblically inclined, there are certain biblical characters too that could not really get to the next step of their destiny until they came to some physical locations.
Oh wow, give us some examples, please.
Yes. All right, so there's this story of I'll give an example now, but let me just finish that one. Until they came to some physical places, locations. There are some who could not get to the next level until they met certain people. So those catalysts can be people, places, events. And so there are just these moments that you encounter that you just feel like there's something different about this moment. There's something different. This has a chance to be my defining moment, right? Like when Jesus was with those men on the road to Emmaus and they didn't know that it was him. After he had gone, they said, were our hearts not burning when he was speaking with us? So they sensed within themselves that was a different moment than anything else. So there are some times when you only get to meet yourself under certain specific conditions. For me, that was Lagos. So you asked for examples. I think there's the story of Jacob. Jacob was instructed to go to a certain place. I don't remember where. I think it was Bethel. I'm not sure. But on his way to that place, he came across. What is it?
When he wrestled with God and his name changed?
No, not then. He was supposed to get. He had changed his name and all that. He was supposed to get to a certain place. I don't remember where. But on his way to that place, he passed through the land of Shechem and saw that the land was good. And he settled there. He bought land and settled there. But, according to the story, God's plan for him was not to settle in somebody else's land. It was to go and establish his own nation, which was going to be quite some work involved, some journey, but he had to go. I think the place was Bethel, I'm not sure. But on his way going there, he came across the land of Shechem. And he saw the land was good, and because he was a wealthy person, he bought land from them and settled his family there. And because of that, he was not quick to see that there were some philosophical differences between the way he raised his family and the way the Shechemites behaved. And so something happened when his daughter went out into the city and she was violated by one of the men of Shechem. And when her brothers, that was what was her name? It starts with a D. Dinah was her name. I think that's the only daughter of Jacob, that female child of Jacob that was ever recorded. And when she came and reported the case and her brothers heard, they were very angry. They wanted to, but they just decided to wait for their father to return so they could at least hear what he would have to say. And when he got back, he was not very decisive. Why was he decisive? That wasn't his home. He was a guest. So that put him in a precarious situation where he could not act decisively. And so the sons could not lean on his wisdom anymore. And so they went to act on their own. They took whatever action that they could take on their own. They went and had their revenge. And, the story was pretty sad. And after they had their revenge, Jacob himself, their father, was very afraid. And the whole family had to abandon that place and leave. They left the land they bought. They had to leave that place. And because the Shechemites outnumbered them, they had to now leave that place and eventually go to where he was supposed to go to, right? So there's a number of stories like that, but there are certain places that we have to show up in. There are certain identities we have to show up in. There are certain people that we have to connect with in order to actually meet ourselves. There are certain competencies that we never know exist until certain conditions.
Certain conditions are fulfilled. Yes. I absolutely love that. And you always say that in yourself, right? In terms of the things that you go on to accomplish in life. I find that in my own self, in my own journey. There are some things that I do. And it's not that the things become easier. It's just I have the right people. The conditions are kind of right. Because sometimes when I achieve some milestones, I ask myself, I look back and I do a quick retrospective and I'm thinking to myself, why did it take me that long? When I'm looking at it in hindsight, it wasn't that difficult. But I think it goes to the point that you're saying. Sometimes it's that almost that time and chance. It's that you get to that place and it's just that right time and everything just kind of works together so that you can achieve that thing. And I love that. So you got to Lagos. But I also, before we even I think I just kind of powered on, I always like to ask my guests, who were you? Where did you start? Who were you as a child? Who did you want to be growing up? Are you, who were you as a child? What kind of child were you? And who did you project yourself to be when you grew up into the person that you are now, or much further on?
Okay, so when I was a child, I wanted to be a medical doctor.
Oh, wow.
Yes, but only because my uncle, whom I admired, was a medical doctor. So I wanted to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in primary 4, we went to school and they took us to the computer lab a long time ago. And the only thing we were told to do there was to play a game called Pac-Man. And that was my first time of seeing a game. And it was on a computer. I was transfixed. I was staring at it. But not from a consumer angle. I wanted to be in the industry that created this thing.
Oh, wow. Wow. To have that kind of insight at that age. Most people just want to consume. Oh my goodness, I love that.
That was why I decided I wanted to do whatever this thing was called. I didn't know whether it was called computer science or whatever it was. This thing, I want to do it. And it was when I became an adult that I appreciated the fact that my parents let me do whatever I wanted to do. I thought it was just a given.
Okay.
I thought it was just, I chose this and I did it. I took it for
granted. Are you kidding me? So you're not one of those children who their parents fill their jam form and say, this is what you're going to study in life. Oh, wow. You're one of the lucky ones, eh?
Yes. But I didn't know I was lucky until I got to university and met other people from different backgrounds. I met a lawyer that said, I'm just studying this because of my father. And once I'm done with it, I hand him my degree. I'll go do whatever I want to do, music or arts or something. So that gave me, I was like, oh wow. And it wasn't just one person or two.
It's everybody. It's everybody. Like I wanted to be an architect. I was feeling my jam form. My uncle rocks in the door and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm feeling, and he's like, you can't be an architect. We're from the Niger Delta. You have to be a petroleum engineer. Come on, bring it here. Let me fit. That was how my destiny changed.
So I didn't know how lucky I was until much later, So even if I had changed my mind to do something else, my father would have been like, okay, as long as you are good at what you do, and not just you are good, as long as you are the best at what you're doing. So that was it. And funny thing is, my aunt in the UK sent us a gift for Christmas one time. It was a mini laptop, one of these mini laptops that's for kids. Not a real laptop like a toy, but it's kind of like a laptop. And that laptop had something called BASIC. Now, BASIC is a programming language, but I didn't know that was a programming language. I just thought they were all games on that toy thing. So when I was about 7 years old, I think, I learned how to program with BASIC without knowing that was programming. Because the game will require certain outputs and you needed to type certain kinds of code to get certain kinds of outputs. So I unintentionally learned programming. Much later, when I enrolled for computer science in school, in university, we actually did Visual Basic as a course in school. And I said, hold on, this looks familiar. So that was the childhood. And again, we also grew up in the lower middle class of Nigeria. We hardly ever had electricity, and we hardly ever had entertainment systems. So I didn't watch a lot of movies growing up. I didn't watch a lot of television growing up. And because you're a child, as a child, you have to express your creative side somehow. If you've got no video games, you've got no comics, you've got no movies, no cartoons, what do? I had to find a way, and I began to ransack the house, and I came across my father's library. So I began to read all his books. I read his books on macroeconomics. Read his books on. He had this medical encyclopedia when those things were still a thing, and I would read those things.
Like how old were you? About what age were you reading?
7, 8. Yeah. And again, I didn't think it was extraordinary because that was all I knew. I didn't interact much with those outside. So one thing about growing up with the lower middle class of Nigeria is that there are only certain areas of the country that you can afford to live. So where we grew up there was in Surulere, a very, you know, a kind of not that rough, but you really have to be careful living there. So my dad.
You grew up in Benin. Did you guys live in Lagos initially, and then you moved to Benin, and then you came back to Lagos?
I went to Benin for my university education.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, but I grew up I was born in Port Harcourt, and then I grew up in Lagos. So where we lived was in Surulere, and my dad understood the risks of the environment we were living in. So we were really raised in seclusion. The boundary was the house door, not even the compound gates. So all I knew was what was inside the house. So I didn't know that it was extraordinary that I was reading grown-up books until when I went to boarding school and my mates were talking about comics and this and that, and I'm correcting everybody's English. That's when I knew that I was different. Because I grew up reading adult books, advanced books. And
that's a tip for a parent. That's a tip for a parent right there. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Continue.
So I grew up reading those books, and then my father was a pastor, and so I grew up reading his Bibles back to back. I enjoyed reading the story parts of the Bible. I left the scary parts out, like Revelations. They were like horror movies to me. Like, what's this? Who wrote this thing? Someone just started dreaming or hallucinating and wrote some scary movies. So I just that was my perception as a child. I also so I focused on the storified parts of the Bible, like the books of Samuel and the Kings and the Chronicles. Those are my favorites. So I would read those things and read different translations, and that's how I essentially grew up. I didn't know the full meanings of the things that I was reading at the time, but they were being lodged somewhere in my subconscious mind. And then when I started my career, I began to enter life and see correlations with all those things and all those
things
stories.
That you're reading. Oh, wow.
Yes, and that's how that's why I think my message caught on really well, because of the correlations that I would make. I mean, imagine who correlates life with physics, chemistry, biology, or mathematics.
Yeah.
So that was a kind of new approach that the markets saw, and like, wow, who's John Obidi? And also Bible stories that people never read many meanings into. I would correlate them to actual life lessons and life principles, and people were really wowed by that, and that's how my thing took off. And again, I didn't know that it was a big deal because I grew up that way. But the first time I shared, and I was also cautious about sharing anything about my religion or about my spirituality, because I thought it would turn people off. But I just tried it one day and people were shocked, like they were commenting like, wow, I've never seen this story explained in this way. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought everybody had that, but okay. So that part of my difference helps.
Were you an only child? Are you an only child?
No, I'm the first of 5.
Oh, first of 5. So yes. Do you find that, that kind of upbringing, was it everybody? Because I'm always intrigued, because the truth is that everyone can have the same exposure, but people will take to the exposure that they get differently. So what is that in terms of, obviously you don't want to compare yourself with your siblings, because they'll probably be listening and say, John said this. No. But how is it really in terms of do you think that you took on to those things differently because obviously you're raised in the same house, or do you feel that they're like similar to you as well?
Well, environment is important, but I think there's something there's a huge role that personality plays. So that's why these days we have all these personality tests and strength finders. We are all different. 5 people or 2 people can be born into the same household under the same set of conditions and still turn out differently. Based on our natural proclivities. Someone would tend more towards entertainment. Somebody would tend more towards academia. It's just that way. And hopefully the person who tends more towards academia has an environment that fosters that. The person who tends more towards entertainment also should hopefully has an environment that fosters that. But even based on similar conditions, people will still have their natural tendencies to go in this way or that. That's why you have kids. Some kids are just naturally boisterous and all over the place. Some kids are just naturally quiet and introspective and reflective. Born by the same parents, lived in the same household. Yes.
I hear that.
But there are some parts of my life that have to do with the fact that I was also the firstborn, because I've realized that it's a thing with a lot of Igbo households. I think the Yorubas do it too. I don't know about other cultures to the degree to which they do it, where a lot of the pressure is placed on the firstborn son and daughter. So the firstborn son and daughter are raised to be the model children, because they keep on saying things like, your younger ones are watching you, people are watching you, and all that, which, you know, that path on its own has its pleasures and it has its price. The pleasure is that you grow up being generally more responsible, generally more well adjusted, because from a young age you have a robust understanding of consequence, and you understand why reputation is important from that age. Others might not really get it until they burst into their 30s, but from a young age you get it. Unfortunately, though, there's a disadvantage. Firstborns that are bred that way tend to be more risk averse. They don't want to take risk because of that conditioning. So they fear public failure a lot, or public embarrassment a lot. And that used to be me for a while, until I came to a point of consciousness and realization, and I was able to break out of that. And so you see the younger ones are more adventurous. They are the ones that travel, go do things, take risks.
They have the time of their lives. Like literally, there isn't any judgment on them. They have the time of their lives. I totally love that. And just out of interest, though, what are your strengths? I think maximizer will be one of your strengths.
I know that it exists as a fantastic strengths finder, but I haven't.
You haven't taken the test. No. I thought you meant that you're taking the test. So
no, there's a different one there's a different one that I've taken actually. It's done by this website called 16 Personalities.
Okay, I'll check it out. 16 Personalities.
So that one does a comprehensive personality test. They even, if you pay for the premium, they even advised on they advise on the career paths that would suit you the most, or that you would tend to excel the most at. And that's where I knew that I was going to be a teacher. Yes. Wow. I'm really good at teaching. I didn't know that. I mean, people would say, wow, I love the way you explain this. I mean, things that I thought were common knowledge, I would speak about it, and people would just bring out pen and paper and be taking notes, and I'll be surprised. It's just normal, but they were experiencing me differently than I was experiencing myself. So when I got that personality test done, I was like, oh, okay, so I can now be more intentional about it. And so I went all in on my webinars, and I knew that if an average person were to try this out and get maybe 100 viewers, since this is my genius domain, I will get at least 1,000 viewers on the same thing. So I just went all in. It really helps, because so you don't waste time on that many experiments before you find your thing. The earlier you find your thing, the better. So you can really spend a lot of time. I mean, look at someone like Tiger Woods, for instance, who found his thing very young. So he had a long reign. Look at the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena Williams. They found their thing very early, and thankfully were incubated by their father in that thing, and so their reign at their peak was really long.
But what part of this thing, though? So I just want to touch on this. What part of it is design versus it was an innate skill? So I think obviously there has to be a level of it being innate abilities. Yes. But a lot of these people, because these days it's almost like a factory, particularly for tennis, they literally give birth to tennis champions. I was watching the interview, and we have so segued in this interview. I will have to literally chop this podcast off.
That's okay.
But I was watching Naomi Osaka's on Netflix, her Netflix this thing, and it was interesting because she was saying her parents, they basically said, you know what, this girl is going to be a tennis champion. And same for Venus and Serena. So she was on the tennis court at the age of 3. So what part of it is, can we design anything, or is there, just what I mean? I'm asking a question that I don't really know how to ask. What part of it is innate ability versus we decide that we want John Obidi to be this, and we expose him to that entirely for a particular period of time, and that is what he knows, and by virtue, that is what he demonstrates.
Yeah, so there is a lot that design has to play, and the degree to which design is intentionally orchestrated can overshadow even innate inclinations. So if someone has a talent for something, it doesn't mean that person will necessarily excel at it. It just means that with the right push, they would naturally incline towards this direction. Naturally. It doesn't make them skilled at it from birth. So whereas someone at 5 years old might meet Serena Williams on the court, and they're teaching the 5 years old the rudiments of swinging the racket. Serena Williams holds the racket and just swings it like it's nothing. Not like a champion, but she just doesn't need that basic lesson. She just naturally does it. Or when they're teaching them from the first lesson, she just gets it in 5 minutes. The other person takes an hour to get it. There's something called there are different types of intelligence. There's something called kinesthetic intelligence. That is the kind of intelligence where someone is better able to control their bodies than other people. So you see people who are just natural dancers. They can just watch a dance step on TV and they're imitating it, right? There's some people who can't move their bodies to save their lives. However, they express their intelligence in other ways, right? Maybe they rank higher in conscientiousness and in the other kinds of intelligence. They are more analytical and so on. So there's nature, there's nurture. Now, sometimes nature, will play its part, but nurture is, I think, the biggest catalyst. Environment is a huge catalyst. Elon Musk, for example, I saw where, when he gave birth to his kids, he did not find any school curriculum that could really suit how he wanted his kids to grow up. So he had to create his own school.
Stop it. Really?
Yes.
Don't you admire that kind of intentionality, though?
Yes, I do. So much. I think he has about 6 or 7 kids.
So he designed the school that they will go to because he's aware of the impact the environment has on them.
Then parents who think like him send their kids to the school.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of the school is. So even the Stanfords that we are looking at as aspirational, he deemed them to be, insufficient for how he wanted to design, so that environment is very important. That's why you can see maybe a student enrolls in some Nigerian school and they're doing badly and poorly, and the judgment of the teachers is that the person is dull. The person transfers to a school somewhere in Germany or France and tops their class. What happened? Environment. So that environment, that architecting of the environment that kids would grow is really important. Like the Bible would say, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he grows up, he will not depart from it. That way, that environment is very important. And even if there is still a natural inclination, that will give them much more speed in that direction. There's this book called Outliers. It was written by Malcolm Gladwell. And in that book, he did a lot of research where he dived deep into the story of people that we just saw as natural geniuses and successes to see what were the factors behind their successes. And one of the people that he looked into was Bill Gates. Now, many people do not even know the history of Bill Gates or one of the things that led to his success. They think it was just natural brilliance. Well, that played a part, but that's not the full story. One of the biggest catalysts to Bill Gates' success is a factor that very few people know. If you know what to search for on Google, you might find it, but unless you are looking for it, you will never find it. What is that factor? His mother.
Oh, really?
Yes. Bill Gates' mother was one of the most...
I've heard this story before, actually.
Yes.
But go on. I think I've heard this story, but go on.
She was one of the most powerful educated and influential women of her time. She wasn't regular by any standards. If you check her, there's a Wikipedia page on her that she has so many qualifications. Like, she was so heavily educated. She was the first woman to do so many things. But one of the things that she was doing was that she served on the board of one particular organization. She didn't serve on the board. She was the first female chairman of that board. And on that same board, a member of that board was I think the chairman of IBM at the time. So she approached him and said, "Hey, my son has this idea. Please give him a chance."
Oh, wow.
And hear him out. And so he said, okay. So he went back to IBM and told his colleagues there, and so they arranged a meeting. Bill Gates now came to present, and the rest, they say, was history. Right? So that environment, and I read a little bit about how he was raised too. His parents allowed him to forge himself. There were times when according to some of the accounts, his mother would call him to come do something, either to eat or to come, and he would say, "Mom, can't you see that I'm thinking?" And she would leave him alone. I mean, this is a global podcast, so I won't even compare it with what kind of a reaction that retort would get in West Africa.
For those of you who are not watching the video, I did call. They call it not knock.
Oh my. And also, reading that book, I saw that the particular university Bill Gates went to, and by the way, Bill Gates didn't go to study computer science. He went to study law. That was what he dropped out studying, law. Because his father was a lawyer. He was going to, get into the law practice. So he was studying law, but it was at a university that was one of the only universities, if not the only, that had a computer in that whole state. So if he had been posted to a different university, things may have turned out differently. But it was at a university that had the only computer in that state.
So this is going back to people. So there's people, his mother, places, the university, and the man. Okay, cool. Yes. I'm seeing how you're connecting things here, John.
Yes. So he got there, he got enamored with computers, and there was where he met his friend Paul Allen, with whom he founded Microsoft in that university. And he used to try to get himself more. He would spend so much time with the computers, and it was because he fell in love with computers there that he decided to drop out of law school. Or not law school, he decided to drop out from university where he was studying law, right? And so we would wonder, what if he had been born to a poor family? How would that have panned out? Right? Environment is very key. We look at the story of Steve Jobs also. Many people don't know that Steve Jobs was adopted by the Jobs family. Yes, I think his birth parents were of Syrian origin.
He's adopted?
Yes. Yeah. I think his birth parents were of Syrian origin. So imagine if
he was in Syria, would he have been able to?
Imagine that. Probably been fighting some war or become an activist, fighting against oppression, right? So
let us make this practical for our listeners then.
Yeah.
For people who listen, what are you then trying to say? It's important that obviously you strive to do the things that you want to do, but there are also dash. I want you to feel.
Okay. So this is something I feel very strongly about. But a lot of people have been coddled, CODDLED. So truth is very hard to take in this age that we're in. People want, you can do it. As long as you set your mind to it, you can do it. My dear, if those conditions are not met, you'll just be a dreamer for life.
Wow.
Now, all fingers are not equal. We are all born into all kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot choose your country of birth. You can't choose your birth parents. You can't choose the circumstances of your birth. But from the minute you decide that, look, this is who I want to be, it is your job to fight, to enter into the right environments that would catalyze your growth. So, for example, I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Port Harcourt. I was born to lower middle class. But in my mind, I was never lower middle class. I began to push. I mean, I come from a place called Ibuzo in Delta State. We lived there, and I began to push. I left Ibuzo, got to Benin. From Benin, I got to Lagos. From Lagos, I found a way to leave. See, I never got on a plane, on anything that could fly, until I was 28 years old.
Wow.
I never did. So if it's based on environment or natural environment, I didn't have that. In some aspects, I had some advantages compared to some people. But if you look at where I'm at now, most people attempted to imagine a history for me. They imagine I come from a rich family,
yes,
Ivy League education. I forced myself into this because I said, John Obidi. Yes, especially with that. I said, John Obidi, you are too brilliant for your life to waste based on how this incompetent government behaves, or that dictator behaves, or this happened. No. You are too brilliant to live and die being a could have been.
So when did you have that realization that you are brilliant and that there is more to you?
I've always known that. There was some hubris that played a part because I was always first in class. My father made sure of that. I had lesson teachers upon lesson teachers because that was his own pride. So I always, I didn't know I was different until I got into boarding school and university, and I knew I was different. I knew that the way I see things is different. The things that I want out of life are different. When I speak to people, the effect I have on them is different. And so I said, look, and I took a lot of inspiration from the one of the parting words that Jesus Christ had with his disciples. He said that you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. And he said something there that's very profound. He said, it makes no sense to take a candle and hide it under a bushel.
Under a bushel.
You take it out and you put it on the highest point of the house so it can give light to the entire house. He then now went on to say, so let your light so shine
before men.
Not before God. Men, human beings, they have to see the light. So when people say, oh, I don't want to show myself too much, is there. He said, let it shine before. They have to see it before men, that they may see your good intentions, your good thoughts, your good heart, your plan, your strategies. No, your good work, because that is how you are going to be rewarded. And so I said, you know what? I have to strive to make this happen. And so everything on my bio, the international speaker and all that, I did not leave this country until 2015. But until that, I said, this is my destiny. I'm going to meet it there. And so then I've spoken in, I think, about 5 countries so far and counting. But I just believe that, look, I'm the light of the world. I'm salt of the earth. Every corner of this world has to experience my greatness. And so I had to push and make sure that I was in those environments. I sought out mentors, right? I sought out mentors who were more exposed than me, who were more accomplished than me, and I served them, I learned their ways, and my growth was catalyzed. So places, fantastic. People, some people say things like, oh, I wasn't brought up like this, I was brought up this way. There's something called reparenting yourself. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, all right? People can blame their parents all they want, but when it's having your own children, you are going to gain a lot of perspective that parenting is never easy. So whatever happens, I know that there are different situations and backgrounds, I get it, but the things that your parents couldn't do for you, doing for yourself is called reparenting. When you see those deficiencies, you can start plugging them. Okay, what kind of friends do I? So the kind of friends that I choose are very deliberate, very intentional. There are those that plug some of those things that don't just come naturally to me because I didn't have that kind of upbringing, but it came naturally to them. So for anybody who has a dream, you have a goal, sitting down there and hoping is not, I mean, people say it because it sounds good, and they say, oh, believe, if you believe. If you look at, even if you allude to the Christian Bible, when the Bible defines this thing we call faith, people misconstrue faith for hope. They are not the same thing. If you look at Hebrews 11, where it says, by faith, Abraham did this. By faith, Moses did this. By faith, this person did this. Faith is something you do in anticipation of what you believe will happen.
Preach it.
So you say that I believe I'm going to be an international speaker one day. What are you doing in Port Harcourt? It means you don't believe it. Because by now you'd have gotten your documents ready. By now you would have researched on organizations that need this talent. By then you have started pitching, because you believe that the end result is that you will become an international speaker. Faith is what you do in anticipation that what you are asking for will happen, or what you believe will happen. It's not hope that, hey, one day God will do it. What are you talking about? Right? There's I think the late Archbishop in the house used to say this. He said that I will not do for God what only God can do, and God will not do for me what only I can do. You know, but a lot of times the version of Christianity that has been marketed to our part of the world is one that just makes people lazy and indefinitely hopeful. To just wait, oh, God will help me, or one day to happen, and it's just hope. That's not faith. Faith is you know what, John, you're the light of the world, and your destiny is to be heard in all corners of the earth. Okay, so what do we do to prepare for that? How do we anticipate? Because when that happens, when that call comes, I want to be ready. So travel documents ready. Okay, I need to be documenting all my speaking engagements in Nigeria and put them on YouTube. I need to tag them correctly. I should probably do some live events in Lagos. Hold some live events. Invite this speaker, that speaker, so that when that thing comes, they will have work to reference. Okay, cool. So let me start. Who do I invite today for this event? You do this. I need this hall to be packed. I need it covered on video and photographs, so that when I post it online, and those people in my future that are going to call me, when they see it, they'll be like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. So everything you do leading up to that defining moment, that is faith.
The problem is that being able to, break that future from the reality, understanding that
It's
what
tough.
I'm doing is
Totally
for the future.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
difficult to decouple.
Yes,
John.
like you were telling me before we started recording, that you found out from someone that at 15 years old I was a bricklayer.
Yes,
and you're like, wow, So just like what you're saying now, that when you compare that vision to the current realities, it can be like night and day. Like, how can these things be? It's like Mary was saying to the angel, how can these things be? So
well, how was that? Like, let's talk about the journey. Like, how did you, from the John that you were talking about, lower middle class, where did the bricklayer situation come in? Was it before you went to university, or how did that? Wow.
Yeah, just before I went to university, I was 15 years old, and things were just really tough for my family then. So not just me, my brother and I went out on the streets of Port Harcourt to find work as laborers. And, there's a lot of construction going on. So that's the kind of work that we found.
And how did that feel for you? I'm sure that must have just been like, did that feel like, I don't know, some people will say, was it so destroying? Because at that point, you knew what you carried. Did you feel like, I know who I am? How can I be doing this? I didn't
feel that way.
Right.
I mean, looking back now, it makes sense to feel that way. But in that moment, I didn't feel that way. I just saw it as a solution. We needed money, and that was money. They were paying 700 naira per day.
Wow.
That's all. I just saw how much did they pay bricklayers? 700 naira per day. Sign me up. That was all I was thinking. I wasn't very good at it anyway, because physically I was a late bloomer.
Thank God.
Thank God. I was terrible at it. I wasn't physically strong as a child or as an adolescent. I wasn't physically strong. I think most of my physical development came in my mid-20s. I'm what you would call a late bloomer. But I just wanted to do it, and so I couldn't even properly hold the implement. I struggled with it, and the overseer of the site saw me one day and And when he heard me speak, he said, "Why are you doing this work?" It was funny. He said, "Why are you doing this?" He called me and said, "Come, where are your parents?" I said, "They're at home." Because I I was different. I've always spoken this way, always. So he got me to stop doing that, and he used to send me on errands instead. So after like a couple of weeks of doing the menial work, he got me to, that was at the time when there was no internet banking and banking was really crude in Nigeria. He used to send me to deliver money to his building material suppliers.
You got a promotion in a way.
Yes, yes. And that, I was really happy to get that promotion. I was really happy because I was earning, he would pay me the same thing he paid the laborers to do work that I would just give him money to get on a bus, go to his suppliers and pay them, or sometimes help him collect money and bring to the site. So for me, it was huge. I did that for another 1 month before school resumed. That was during that, I think, that period of one long ASU strike for 9 months. So I think after that, school resumed and I left that behind. I went on school. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the gifts of a man will make room for him. Your gifts, the real gifts actually made room for him. I love it.
It never felt shameful, never felt weird. I don't know. I was just so locked in on solutions at the time. Like, where do we go from here? That's always been the question. Where do we go from here? What do we do next? Where do we go from here? Never had a second to pity myself. You know, I never knew that self-pity was a thing until I met people who did self-pity.
Oh wow.
It was never in my reality for self-pity.
It's a big thing, John. People sit down and throw pity parties.
Yeah, I later got to understand that when I went to university, because one of the things about university is that you get to meet people from other backgrounds and you make friends from very different backgrounds, and that's when I now saw other realities that were different from mine. Based on how we grew up, there was no self-pity. Always solution. Okay, what do we do now? You know, you spill something, glass has broken. You are not like, hey, wow, well, glass has broken. You're already going to get a broom to sweep it up. It's like, you know. So there's this Bible story, you see, because of all that Bible I read when I was a child. There's this Bible story that's very instructive in this regard, where David had that thing with Bathsheba, and God said that the child would die, but the child fell sick. So David began to cry and wail, and he began to fast. He did not shave. He did not bathe. He began to mourn and pray that maybe God would change his mind and save the child. But eventually the child died. And when he heard that the child had died, he stood up.
As soon as I read,
enough feet. He just stood up, shaved, had his bath, called for food, and he began to eat. I beg.
David's heart there. I don't understand that guy.
I've tried what I want to try. I've not what to do. It has happened, eh? But yeah, look at the chop they go.
That is actually really instructive in the sense that David was a man after God's own heart. The fact that he didn't wallow away, but there were moments in David's life where he would sit down and say, "Hey, God," and cry and throw himself a pity party. But I think in that instance, it wasn't the case for him. But yes, so John,
I think for me, it's realizing that whatever you're going through, the world will keep on spinning. Like, the world is not going to pause and say, "Oh, this person is going through this right now and they're unable to continue with their mission. Let's just pause for a while until they can get their act together." No, it's going to keep on spinning. And while I understand the need to pause sometimes, we need to be intentional with how we grieve, with how we mourn, with how we suffer pain. What I mean is that, look, it's 2021. There's so much support for these things. I don't know if your parents grew up in Nigeria, but okay, so in their time,
I grew up in Nigeria. My time, I was in Minipot.
Okay, cool. So in their time, things like therapy were not popular. So how did they deal? How did they deal with trauma? Did they not experience it? Of course they did, but it wasn't an option then. So they just soldiered on somehow. But in our generation, you can see a therapist. Now, you can refuse to take that option, but it's there.
A
There are
lot of
different,
people refuse it.
yeah.
There's just this stigma attached to it, and I've done a show about it. Why everyone needs therapy. Actually, was the title of the show.
Look at that. If you go to my Instagram story, I just posted a couple of hours ago that every Nigerian adult needs therapy.
Every single person needs therapy.
I posted it that everybody needs it. You know, so at least if something is going on with you, these guys are trained. They are trained in something called the psychological method. They can spot destructive patterns in your life, sometimes immediately, based on certain markers they have been trained to catch. They can spot it almost immediately or after a couple of sessions, but they are trained to spot it. That is something that you may never discover is a dysfunction in 20 years on your own. And it's okay because you don't have that training. Well, they do, so why not? So in our generation, we have so much. We even have this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Is the kind of therapy that you can do on yourself, and there are some apps that even offer that service. And so we have so much, and so there's so much in our generation that we have that has been given to us to enable us accomplish our mission much faster, much more powerful than those who came before us. So we have to. So I know that some people are quicker to heal from something, but we have more. I mean, like, look at something like that. If you take a blade now and cut someone, you know, he might take a while for the blood to clot and cover up the wound. If you do that to a diabetic, that might be a big problem. So yeah, people heal differently. But I was talking to a friend yesterday. She's based in the US, and she said that man, John, you know, the way medical sciences have improved here, there's this pill that diabetics can take, not even insulin. They can take this pill like once a day, and they can go and eat their cake or whatever. You know, I was like, what? You know, I don't know the specifics of that, but things have improved so much. And so counting your blessings is a very big deal. That gratitude thing is a very big deal. It gives us perspective that we don't have it as bad. And for the areas where we have it bad, there is a solution.
There's always solutions.
There's a place in the Bible. Yes, there's a place in the Bible where, you know, King Saul had misbehaved and God had said, you know, I'm done with King Saul. I'm going to get somebody else. The story says that Samuel, the prophet that actually anointed King Saul, he was mourning and grieving that, oh, did I make a bad choice? He was just grieving and grieving. And God came and said, how long will you grieve over Saul? Get up. I've anointed somebody else. And so whenever I'm in that situation, I remember that, okay, you have grieved, yes, but for how long will you grieve over this? It's a solution. There's a replacement. You know, so that's just what I would add to that.
I love that. It's important to be solution focused, like just always thinking about. I love it. So there are two things. I don't even know which way to go, but there are two things I really, really want to touch on. Number one, we've already kind of touched on it, but it's that manifesting your higher self and being intentional. I love the way you put it about faith, being that preparation before the thing actually happens, rather than waiting for this thing to magically happen and calling it faith. I love that, and I would love for you to just kind of speak to somebody. I mean, you've given some practical tips. You say you want to be a speaker. What does a speaker do? You've given, but I really want you to help some people change their paradigms around limitations, because there are some people that are listening to this. They are just sitting down waiting for this job to come. I cannot do this because I don't have this job. I cannot do this because I don't have this. I cannot. What are some practical tips that you can give them? Say, you know what, you can't do those things, but do you know the things that you actually can do that in your control? There are a lot. So I would look for you to talk to that. So,
like you just said, that there are some things that you can't do, but there are other things that you can do, right? And also there are angels that God has placed in our path. You have to be able to identify them.
Okay.
You see, Dr. Mike Murdoch always says that wisdom is the ability to recognize difference. To recognize the difference in people, the difference in a moment, the difference in opportunities. There are people that God has placed in our path to make our journey easier. But sometimes we might be slow to recognize these people. Sometimes due to some personality defect, we shun these people. Either we are rude to them, or we just don't talk to them, or because we say, oh, I'm an introvert, which is not the meaning of introvert, but I'm an introvert, I don't like talking to people, I'm shy. You miss that opportunity. But in as much as there are a lot of issues, a lot of abusers, there are also angels placed in our path. There are so many junctions in my life where, despite my fantastic upbringing, I could have gone left. But at every junction, there was always an angel placed there. A human being that just prodded me in this direction, or in that direction, or in that direction. And I've always been quick to identify them. Right? So even around us, there are those angels amongst our friends. Sometimes these angels don't look in the way that we might prefer. They don't sound in the way that we might prefer, right? And we may need to go beyond that packaging. There's some people who, based on how they look and how they carry themselves, you may never go befriend them regularly. But the day you have a conversation with them, you'll be shocked at just how much perspective they carry and how much speed they give you, at least on that part of your journey, right? So there may be some things you cannot do, but what can you do? All right. So for me, I want to be international. I couldn't just travel out of Nigeria back when I was in Benin, but I could at least travel to Lagos. I couldn't become relevant internationally then, but I could at least become relevant in the Lagos that I was. He that is faithful in little will be faithful in much. So I did all that I could everywhere that I was, with anything that I had. So it's about maximizing your potential at that particular point in time. And potential grows. Potential grows, capacity grows while you are building capacity. In the parable of the talents, it says that the master gave the servants 5, 2, and 1 according to their ability. We don't all have equal abilities, but what we do with what we have. So the guy that had 5 and made 5 more, fantastic. The guy that had 2 and made 2 more, 2 is less than 5, but the master knows that is according to his ability. He tried. The guy that had only 2 to work with could not multiply and have 5 more. He could only get 2 more. That's okay. Congratulations. The guy who had 1 did not even want to use his ability. He wants to go and bury it. So it's about doing what you can according to your abilities. And as your abilities are expanding, maximizing. So imagine now, someone had 2 talents. You got 2 more. Now it's 4. If you take 4 and go back to trade and you get 2 more, that's below your potential because you had 4 now to work with. Right? So wherever you are, doing what you can and always looking out for the angels. There are those angels that can just give us our quantum leap. If I didn't meet for these angels at critical points in my journey, you wouldn't know my name today. I would have been probably, a Yahoo boy. It's possible. There are some routes you take and that just becomes your life. Or some drug dealer. There are some routes, you're young and impressionable. Somebody in that line of work comes and offers you mentorship. Who knows? If you interview all these people and they tell you how they started, it probably started like that, right? But thank God, the people who were presented to me were people who were of right standing, and that became my path. If people who were presented to me at that point in time were questionable people, that could also have possibly been my path. We don't know because that possibility did not occur, so we can only celebrate this angle of things. But we don't know what could have happened to all those other doors that were shut. We have to always keep our eyes open. The opportunities around us and the people around us. We also have to be able to acknowledge the deficiencies in our learnings growing up. When you're humble enough to realize that, I think I'm deficient in so many ways, you can humble yourself and learn. Like me, for example, because I wasn't as... I remember the first time I flew to anywhere was in late 2014. I was invited to come and speak in Benin. I didn't know anything. I'd never been to an airport before. I was 28 years old. I had never been. If you look at me, speak with me, you'll be like, this guy is sophisticated. I had never been to an airport before. Never. I got there, I didn't know what a check-in counter was, I didn't know what a booking pass was. I just entered and was looking around. Like a lost puppy. You know, I was just so lucky that somebody came in. Somebody came in to the airport there. That was a convener of the event. He recognized me from the flyer. I recognized him too. I said, Mr. Bing, I said, John Obidi, how now? Have you got your boarding pass? Didn't know what a boarding pass. I didn't know what a boarding pass was. But since I just arrived, the answer had to be no. So I said no. We said, okay, come, let's go this way. Let's follow him. We got it together. When they were going through the scanners, the body scanners, I was just watching what they were doing and following. We got on the plane. Even when there was turbulence, I didn't know what turbulence was. So I didn't know why people were shouting, Jesus, Jesus. I didn't understand. It was my first time. You know, if you've ever been on a flight with Nigerians, you know how dramatic it can
Very
be.
dramatic.
You know? And then when we got to Benin for that event, one of the co-speakers of that event was a man named Iyonluwa Aboyeji. He was the founder and co-founder of Andela, a company that was just a couple years ago bought over by Mark Zuckerberg. So we co-facilitated that event. So we were on the same flight coming back to Lagos. So on that flight, he was way more exposed than me. Way much younger than me, but in terms of exposure, way more exposed than me. So we're talking on that flight, and he asked me more about what I did, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, because then there was this company that I was doing some sort of affiliate ambassadorship for in Lagos, and he was like, this is good, but why don't you, take a trip to their head office in Canada, have a meeting with their CEO, and there's some partnership that you can discuss. I was looking at this guy like, you don't even know that this flight that we are on discussing is my first time ever. You are talking to me about going to Canada for a meeting, because I had not grown to that level, but I needed that conversation. I needed that because my head was expanded. Like, this guy was wise beyond his years, exposed beyond his years, and that conversation, so that seed of international exposure was sown in me. And this ageism thing, when you come from Africa, I tend to see people that are younger than you as below you. That you have to see, calm down. My father used to tell me this Igbo proverb, which in English says, a child who has no parents would go and eavesdrop at the neighbor's house when the parents are advising them. Understanding the importance of superior counsel. So I couldn't carry my shoulders or have any hubris. This guy knows more than you. So I would listen, I would take notes, and having people like him in my circle at that time really helped. I remember when the plane landed, I don't know, have you ever traveled to Lagos by road before?
Yes, I have.
So I was used to that whole hassle. How you would travel, oh, you stop at Ore. You stop at Ore. We'll come down. You buy food. The bus driver will be honning. Everybody hurry. Come into the bus. You drive. Oh, you don't get to Lagos. Probably at night. I was used to that whole hustle. So when this trip from Benin to Lagos was just up, down, I was like, wow.
You can't unsee that experience. That
I said, John Obidi, you are never going by road. You are never going by road again in your life. And that became true. I never went by road again. But me being able to surround myself with people who had superior experiences growing up and from other sources, it really helped. Yes. Mentors, high performing peers. I just forced myself in those environments. And it did help. So people, everyone needs to find that out. We may not have perfect beginnings, but we can have much better endings. But there are people, places, and events that we must connect with in order to get to our next level.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you so much. I want to talk about new media because I can't have the new media guy here and not talk about new media. What is the importance of embracing new media? First of all, what is new media? Because someone might be listening to me thinking, I don't even know what that is. So what is new media? What is the importance of embracing it in this age?
Okay, so media itself is a plural of medium. So medium of communication. So the medium through which you communicate something. So that's why we had mass media, so communicating to the masses, and then we have print media, communicating through print, and then we have new media, which is it includes mostly internet technologies. So we have social media, communicating socially. So new media includes social media, internet business tools, email marketing, mobile apps, everything that has to do with the internet is included there in new media. So that's exactly what new media is. So for people who have a message, for example, I mean, look at the beauty of what we are doing right now. You and I are having this conversation, and it's going to be seen by a lot of people all around the world. In order to do this back in, say, the 60s, you needed a huge budget for this. Huge. And even with your budget, you needed to be at a particular class, economic class, to be considered TV worthy at the time. Which is one of the reasons Oprah Winfrey is so highly revered, because for her to be a black woman playing a white man's game at that time. I mean, not even a man's game, a white man's game. So she was like on total opposite, right? So so you had to be a particular class then and have a kind of budget for that. But look at what's happening in our time with new media technologies. You and I are globally dispersed. We are on far-flung areas of the globe. You are somewhere closer to the west, I'm somewhere closer to the east. Far east, and we can have this conversation. Is being recorded professionally. There's no video crew, but everything is so professionally done, and it's going to be launched on a platform called YouTube, where a lot of people are, and many people are going to find this video. It's huge, being able to reach that many people with your message. So whether you are a personal brand, you are a speaker, you're a coach, you're an author, life has never been this good. It's going to get way better, but life has never been this good. So there are just so many tools right now available to get your message out there at the speed of concern.
Love it. Thank you so much for that. Final question. I say final question a lot, but this is actually my main final one. What is your daily routine? Because I want to get under the skin of how do you maintain this repository of knowledge and keep it replenished. What do you do? What's your daily routine? Because I know that will bless somebody.
Yeah, so I always read. I'm always reading. I like to read. It depends on what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I read just to improve my writing.
Okay.
Because I also write quite a lot, especially on to my Facebook audience and to my email newsletter. And people love the way I write as much as they love the way I speak.
I've got to say, there was one that I read. I think when my friend sent it to me about, I can't remember, but it's lodged in my mind.
Was it the law of unintended consequences?
No, you were talking about hold. You were talking about the fact.
Gotcha.
It was such a great read. I must have read that like 3-4 times. I was like, oh my God, this guy writes so well. Sorry, I just had to do a fangirl moment there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But there was a time I couldn't write, anything worth reading. So I had to train that competency.
How do you train that? Okay, I know I said final question, but how did you train that competence?
So, first thing I did was, when I first started writing, I mean, it's one thing to just write casually. It's another thing to write for people to read. So what I would do would be, I would read books that I admired. And I would notice how they punctuated their sentences, how they made their points. When I read this particular line, when I read this line, it made me feel a certain way. Why did I feel this way? Is there something that this thing is called? You see why I said those things we did in school? Those things, they're the key to life. In English literature, we learned about figures of speech. We learned about alliteration, metaphors, hyperboles, personifications and so on, similes. You know, even if you read the Bible, they use similes a lot. As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longs after thee. As this is to this, so is this is to that. A lot of similes. And so I began to look at, so that's what a simile is. This is after university, you imagine, old man. When you were in school is when you should have learned this thing. That's school, you're now going back to it.
Yeah, no shame. You realize it and you just go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. I had to go back and be like, so that's how you use it. And I realized that when Jesus Christ was teaching, he would say the kingdom of God is like a man who did this, who went here. I'm like, why was he always using stories? Those are metaphors. Those are allegories. Right. So okay, cool. So I want to make a point about this. How do I use a metaphor to make my point more powerful?
Wow, that intentional.
Yes. I will sit down in my room and try to write. All right. I'll now think, okay, I'll now Google, okay, metaphors. I'll now check, and someone say, okay, sources of metaphors could be something in your personal experience or something you've observed in the world. And so when I was reading about writing, the first thing they said was that you have to increase your powers of observation, because a lot of the things you'll be writing will be pulled from not just what you observe, but from your brain being so sharpened at observation. So I've spoken so much on this call now, but I didn't rehearse. You didn't give me an outline. But I've been on a roll because my brain has become so trained in making associations and picking up what is needed at the right time, just picking these things up. And I remember a childhood experience now and say, okay, this is useful in this conversation. And I bring it, I use it as a tool. So sharpening your powers of observation, it does help with your writing. So I'm writing about, say, if I'm writing about maximizing your potential, for instance, my brain starts searching in those hidden files in my mind for stories of someone who achieved their potential under a certain set of conditions. I remember someone like, so recently I taught a class this weekend about your difference, protecting your edge, protecting your edge. All right. And I said that, there's something that God has given everybody, a superpower that God has given everybody to hand them an advantage over everybody else. And when you find what that thing is, you have to protect it. So I was teaching, I just remembered, Samson. On the fly, I didn't open any book. On the fly, I said, Samson. Remember Samson? His edge was what? His hair. And he gave him superhuman ability. And I remember when Samson was talking to Delilah that, if I cut this hair, I will be just as weak as every other man. That is poignant. Because every other man, does it mean that there's something important about not being like every other man? Right? And even when he was in captivity and all that, and he prayed for a second chance, God did not change the superpower to become nails or eyelashes. It was still hair. That hair has to grow back. All right. So that was the sermon about protecting your edge. I did not prepare for anything, but my brain is just making connections. So that's what observation does. A lot of us, especially those of us who lead busy lives, we are too busy to be successful. Too busy. And there are clues all around us. Like the Bible says, see, I'm doing associations again. I'm just picking up associations, right? Like the Bible says, Jesus Christ would just go to be by himself for a time. Would just go away. There was a time that he got into a boat to be away from people, so he could be at sea. There was a time that even when he was on sea, he still wanted to be alone because there were people with him, disciples. He left the boat and started walking on the water and just going. Look, why those things? So we need to be able to just put our foot on the ground and demand that sanity so we can train our powers of observation, because life happens a lot to us and there's so much that we don't catch. Like, what's the color of the shirt that the waiter was wearing today? Did you notice? Did you observe? So his walk is always walk. Checking your phone. It's always work. You had your lunch in a hurry. Sorry, dear, bye. You're off. You're on the train. You're hurrying off. Boss calling, or the office. Oh my goodness, you're at home, kids.
Too busy doing.
Yeah.
Not busy enough.
You're home, kids. And so you go. Next thing you know, it's 20 years have passed, 30 years have passed, right? So one of the tools for reading or for writing is being able to sharpen your powers of observation. And one of the exercises is, because I watched a lot of free YouTube videos to help me. One of the exercises was that, okay, look at anything and write about it. That is the most boring assignment, but it's necessary. So I'll look at this diffuser now, and I have to write down things I observe about this thing. I've talked about the shape. Okay, it's a bit oval shaped. I don't quite understand what color this would be. It's in between gray or ash and white, sort of. It has this brand, and it has 2 buttons here, and I'm just describing this mundane exercise is training my powers of observation. And then one day they'll tell you, okay, write something and refer back to that observation you made about that thing. And it's just training, making those connections. So when you're writing some secular writing, you'll be like, you maybe you're talking about how people can enhance the fragrance of their lives or the fragrance of their profession. You'll be like, the other day I observed a diffuser. I had to put the oils inside, I had to put the water inside, and I plugged it in, and it began to diffuse oils around. But the moment it was unplugged, it stopped working. And so you have to find that thing that turns you on, that thing that switches you on. And that I just made that up right now. I just made it up right now. but it just becomes a part of you. So whether you are speaking, it makes you a more effective speaker, a more effective teacher. Whether you are writing, it makes you more effective. And another thing is that as Africans, we are natural storytellers. That's one thing most of us don't know. We are natural storytellers. The Egyptians invented, I think, ink. They were the first people to invent writing materials. In the West, they documented their history in writing. But in our part of Africa, our history was passed down as stories across generations. It was always told orally. I think the Jews also had that part of their history too. That was transmitted to the next generation only orally. Some parts were never written down, just told orally. So Africans naturally are storytellers. So that also says, oh, you mean Africans love stories? And of course, Africans like gists. Africans love gists. So when you can add storytelling to what you are writing or what you are saying, it might make your writing much longer, but they want to read that story.
They want to read the story. So
when you start a narrative with, the other day I was at a market and I saw one woman. In their minds, they're asking, and what happened? And so on and so forth. So that's how I trained myself. I started out in 2012, and I began to hold regular writing exercises. I used to write every single day, things that I could never publish for anyone to read. But I was training myself. The day I knew I could publish it to the public was when a friend came visiting. And he saw one thing I was writing, and I wanted to hide it, but he just picked it up before I could hide, and he looked at it, and I was like, And he was making notes. I was like, oh.
What?
Till today, he doesn't know that was my defining moment regarding writing.
Wow.
That was the day I knew I could write for the public.
Wow. And how was that the same for you for speaking then as well? Just were you always
it was the same for speaking.
Were you always like, I know you could speak, but there's the technique of being a speaker, isn't there? The fact that you got to be able to speak in a certain way. Did you always know you would be a speaker?
Not really. I knew that, at some point I knew that speaking would play a role in my destiny, but at that time I was a chronically shy person.
This is the part I can't reconcile.
Yeah. Most people think I'm just being motivational when I say it, but truly, those who knew me before 2014 can attest to that.
Shy.
Me then and me now are like night and day. I used to be a chronically shy person. See, one day, so I was a member of a house fellowship in my local church in Benin, and the leader of the house fellowship was traveling to the United States for his master's degree. So when he was leaving, he made a note to the pastor that I was going to take over, but he didn't tell me. If he had told me, I would have run away. See, I have done shameful things in this world to avoid public speaking. I cannot tell anybody. I will take those secrets to the grave. I have done terrible things to avoid public speaking. That's how frightened of it that I was. So I think he may have sensed it, so he didn't tell me so I wouldn't freak out or anything. So he told the pastor. After service one day, the pastor came to me and said, "Hey John, so he told us that you are taking over. So today we are going to be talking about this." I was about to just go home and relax, but I could have said no, and they would have respected my decision. But I just thought to myself that, you know what? Who knows? This might be your opportunity to fight this demon once and for all. Who knows? If you say no, fine, go back and live your ordinary life. That's okay. But if you just say yes to this might be your opportunity to fight this demon once and for all. And I grit my teeth and I said yes to it. I was so afraid of it. The butterflies would come. You know, there are days I would pray that rain would fall so that I could tell them that this is why we did not hold house fellowship. But rain did not fall. So I had to go and do house fellowship. So I would do it. But thankfully, the members of the house fellowship were really nice people. I'm sure they didn't even know that I was even struggling with anything. But I would have butterflies in my stomach. I would struggle through it. I would muscle through it. How many people did the house fellowship serve? Just 5 people though. Just 5 people. I want to die. You know, I would muscle through it, and then over time, I began to be like, okay, I began to tolerate it. And then I began to be like, okay, this ain't that bad.
Almost enjoyable.
Yeah, almost enjoyable. And then over time, it actually became enjoyable. And then over time, I began to look forward to it. And then over time, I began to seek more opportunities. I now told the pastor that, see, I want to be teaching church members social media marketing after church for free, just to keep on training myself. So that was my training ground. I began to learn practically about body language. That was back in Benin, about body language. I was training my sense of humor. I would land this joke. If they don't laugh, okay, cross it out. Land the next and they laugh. Okay, that one works. Okay.
I love it.
Zero shame. I was just doing that. And so when I came to Lagos and began doing public speaking, they thought, okay, maybe I was born with it. No, I had a history.
Actually,
back in Benin. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You had good training ground. So you said you read, your daily routine. Just throw us 5 things that you do every day.
Okay. So I'll tell you the ones that are easier to accept. So reading. So I read every single day. If I'm reading to train my writing, I try to read people whose writing style I really admire. Not that I really care about the content, but how they are passing their points across. I just like to read those ones. Then also the ones that help me professionally, I read those ones too. And then I write every single day. Every single day. Even if it is nothing profound, it might just be me documenting my observations from the previous day or from the previous week. It just helps to train me in that way. And then something I do, I don't know if I'm the only one who do. I'm not anybody else who does this. It might seem weird, but I practice public speaking. Not as in a. I might just be alone in the room, and I'm just practicing saying a particular thing in a particular way to measure the effect. So I don't want to just say something and it's just regular. I want to say it with impact. Sometimes I would practice saying something over and over again. I'll practice, okay, I think that landed well. I'll go to the mirror and I would say it. I'll be like, okay, good. Okay, no, that landed a bit too preacherish. Okay, try it this way. Okay, maybe smile a bit. I would like, okay, cool. So I would choreograph certain things, especially when I want to do a webinar that's coming up soon. The ones that are going to show my face, I would think, okay, what kind of joke will really enter these people that made them go crazy in the comments? Okay, I'll try. So I would script those things.
That level of intentionality.
Oh yes. You don't pack thousands of Nigerians during their sleeping time on a Friday night without being that intentional. Night school is Fridays by 11 p.m. Friday, when people say TGIF, it's not to come and be hearing preaching again. It's TGIF to go and chill. You're not doing it by 11 p.m. So for thousands to be awake with you then, you can't just be regular. So I make sure that I script those things in my head. And so even my tone of voice, right? I make sure I rehearse it. So I don't talk to the screen the way I talk to people. When I talk to people, my tone is a bit more relaxed and more, genial. This is a bit too aggressive to have a conversation with somebody. And I think when we started this whole thing, before I started getting recorded, my tone of voice was very different. It was more conversational. Like, this is way too aggressive, but this is my speaker voice. So the way I enunciate my words is with intention to deliver a particular effect. So I'm speaking with authority, I'm speaking with power, and somebody on the other end receives it in the way that I'm intending. But when I'm done with this, I relax back to, hey, so how was your day? That changed.
I love it. So that's number 3. Do we want two more things?
Two more. What else do I do?
Every day. I think I know one of them.
Exercising.
Bible or something. Great. Go on. Exercising. Okay.
Exercising. Very religiously, I exercise. I'm a very big fan of HIIT. It's called high intensity interval training. So it's a very short workout you can do in 20 minutes or less. And what it does is that it gets the blood flowing and helps push oxygen to the brain, and it helps me make the most out of my creative mornings. So when I do that exercise, it helps me stay in shape, but it gets the blood flowing and all that. I also make sure that my nutrition is on point. I do my utmost best. Intermittent fasting is also very important to me. It helps me think very clearly. It helps me stay in shape also, because again, I always want to be an excellent person. It's fine, I speak well, but I also want to look really good in suits to maximize the effect. So I make sure I eat in moderation or certain kinds of foods, and I work out, try my best to live healthy. And those are the things I think I do most religiously. Everything else, they complement, but these ones are what
are the main ones.
What mostly make me. And then there are some people whose thoughts. So what I do say a lot is that if I were to ask people that are watching this video now, who is your, let me not say mentor, but who are your role models? Someone will mention this name or that name, this public figure or that public figure, this inventor or that innovator, and so on. And then I would ask another question. I'm like, okay, so how many hours a week do you spend with them?
They will bring the excuse of they're not in my immediate sphere, but obviously they can actually get their content.
You can get their content. So there are certain people whose way of thinking I love. I spend hours per week with these people virtually. Religiously, it is in my schedule, it's in my calendar. Anybody calls me at that time, I'm not available. Because I realized something, Tom Brown. The continued exposure to a person's expression of his or her gift quickens your own unique expression of that same gift. That is why when you're around a funny person, you become funny. Not because you are copying their jokes, but the part of your brain that is responsible for connecting punchlines and humor becomes quickened and fired up every time you are exposed to this person. People who are deep, if you hang around somebody who is deep, you will start speaking with depth. The Bible would say, he who walks with the wise will be as wise. You might also say, iron sharpens iron. So there are people whose pattern of thought that I really admire, and I would want to get better in that pattern of thought. I spend hours with them through their podcasts, through their videos on YouTube, and through some of their paid products, those who have courses or audiobooks on Audible. So my favorite apps on my phone would be the Audible app, because that's where my audiobooks are. For some books that are not, some audiobooks that are not on Audible, I have them on iBooks for Apple. And then the Kindle app, where I have all those ebooks on, I read their work. And some of those writers, when they write, I'm like, couldn't you just use simple English? How did you? Wow! I just marvel at their genius.
So you're constantly looking. It's not just consuming. It's the how. It's the style. It's the why.
It's yes.
Interesting. It's a very interesting perspective.
Yes, and then YouTube videos are very important too, because you can see how they gesticulate and all that. Okay, now when Elijah died, not died, when he was, according to the story, taken up to heaven, Elisha said he wanted a double portion of his anointing. He said, okay, fine, if you see me when I'm gone, it's going to be yours, and so on and so forth. And that happened. And after that, the prophets were at a distance watching what was happening. So Elisha took his garment or something and struck the river, and it parted, and he walked over, and it parted back. And the prophets now said, the spirit of Elijah is now resting on Elisha. Now let's pause there, because some people tend to get overly mystical about that thing. Let's look for the dictionary meaning of spirit. Let's just go back. Let's not assume that we know English. Let's not assume that we know English. Let me go for spirit meaning. I'm googling it right now.
The essence,
exactly. Thank you. So this one says the non-physical part of the person, which is the seat of emotions and character, the soul. That's one. Another one is the prevailing or typical quality, mood, or attitude of a person, group, or a period of time. So when it says that the spirit of a person is resting on a person, it means that this person's attitudes, moods, way of doing things. That's why we say, let us be of one spirit, one attitude, one accord. How did the spirit of Elijah come to rest on Elisha? Bible historians, this part is not in the Bible, but Bible historians have estimated that Elisha served Elijah for 22 years. Washing his hands and preparing his meals for 22 years. That was enough time to watch his habits, observe him on close range. Everybody else sees him from far and sees the power he exhibits, but he got to observe him on close range and was able to imbibe his characters, his habits, and over time. Now the end result was that he manifested something, and everybody said, okay, the spirit is now rest. No, he has been imbibing that spirit for 22 years. And so there are people who are exhibiting the gifts, manifesting the gifts that we have or want to have at a high level. Imbibing their spirits involves observing them on close range, or if the best we can get is YouTube, get that day and night. Day and night. Day and night. Day and night. I think we're going to say something just now.
Yeah, I often say that most of the time, if you see somebody either on social media, internet, wherever, doing something and it makes you feel a certain way, I often say that it is because you have that thing as well within you.
Yes.
A lot of times.
Yes.
So what they're doing is calling onto your own representation of that thing. That thing that is in you is calling out and say, "Hey, give me expression as well. I can, it resonates." And
like when Elizabeth also said, "The baby in my womb jumped."
Yes, we're mates. I often say that because a lot of times, if you go on social media and you're seeing somebody doing something, you're seeing John Obidi speaking in a setting where you're looking at him like, "Oh my goodness," you just don't know why, but every time you hear him, you feel a certain way. It's because you've got that same gift. You've got that same gift, but you haven't harnessed it. That's just the difference.
Yes.
So I just thought I'll drop that in. But this has been wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
pleasure.
guys. I know that you guys have gotten some value from this. Where can we find you, John? Where can my people find you?
So typically just follow me on Instagram is at John Obidi. You can join my email newsletter. It's just go to the link in my bio.
Epic, by the way.
Yes, thank you. So my newsletter is called The Wisdom Letters. So I just break down my analysis on life, personal development, and sometimes business. And I send that to my email list every Sunday by 7 p.m. Nothing so spectacular about 7 p.m., but just to have that that
Consistency.
timing, that consistency. And I have a Facebook community. It's called Head Start Africa. We have about 168,000 people there now. And that's where I share a lot of my content too. We run free trainings and workshops and webinars to help you in personal development, career, new media, and so on. But my easiest access point is through my Instagram handle.
Okay. All right. And we'll link everything in the bio as well so that you'll be able to connect with John. But I've got to say massive thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being a blessing to our generation. Thank you for just adding value on this podcast. I know that people will not be able to unhear some of the things that they've heard today, and I'm happy for that because I know it will make them better. So yeah, until next time, guys, thank you so much.